Frost, hunger, death. A weary procession trudges across thousands of miles, leaving their homeland in despair. The cries of children pierce through the biting cold, while the elderly collapse by the roadside, too weak to rise again. No one stops. No one has time to bury the dead. They can only keep moving until they can move no more. History calls it the Trail of Tears, a name that barely captures the immense suffering endured by the Cherokee people. But to truly understand how they reached this tragic moment, we must first go back to a time when the Cherokee thrived, long before their world was shattered. The origins of the Cherokee people. The Cherokee are one of the largest indigenous tribes in North America, speaking a language from the Iroquoian family. The name Cherokee is believed to have originated from the Creek language, meaning people of a different tongue. However, they call themselves Ononwea, meaning the principal people. They have a rich cultural heritage with deep-rooted traditions and a complex social system. Before the arrival of Europeans, the Cherokee had built a thriving society with a stable agricultural foundation. They cultivated corn, beans, and squash, while hunting deer, elk, and bears for sustenance. Large villages with houses made of mud and wood were scattered across the southeastern United States. Their society was matrilineal, where women played a crucial role in decision-making, managing property, and maintaining communal unity. Tribal councils and elders held central authority in upholding laws and preserving cultural traditions. First encounters with Europeans. In 1540, when a Spanish expedition led by Hernando de Soto ventured deep into Cherokee territory, it was not just the first meeting of two worlds. It was a fateful moment that would alter the future of an entire people. The Spanish arrived with dreams of gold and conquest. They brought war horses, steel armor, and muskets, things the Cherokee had never seen before. But the most dangerous threat was not their weapons. It was the invisible enemy, smallpox, measles, and influenza. Having never encountered these diseases, the Cherokee had no immunity. Within a few decades, deadly epidemics swept through their villages, claiming thousands of lives and shattering the social structures that had endured for centuries. At first, the Cherokee cautiously welcomed in peace. However, when the expedition began looting food supplies, enslaving natives, and torturing tribal leaders for treasures that did not exist, conflict erupted. The Cherokee fought bravely, but their bows and spears were no match for Spanish cavalry and firearms. When De Soto finally left, he did not leave behind gold, only destruction, disease, and death. Nearly a century later, in 1629, the Cherokee established trade relations with the English. They exchanged animal pelts, especially deer skins, for firearms, metal tools, blankets, and alcohol. Yet trade brought not only prosperity but also irreversible change. Previously, the Cherokee had been entirely self-sufficient, relying on farming, hunting, and craftsmanship. But as European goods became essential, their economy grew increasingly dependent on the fur trade. This dependency fueled conflicts with neighboring tribes like the Creek and Shawnee. As the demand for guns escalated wars over control of resources. Despite these hardships, the Cherokee adapted. By the 19th century, they had achieved remarkable advancements, from Sequoyah's creation of the Cherokee writing system to the establishment of a tribal government modeled after the Pointus Constitution. But no matter how much they tried to assimilate, it could not shield them from the relentless expansionist ambitions of European Americans, ambitions that would lead to the greatest tragedy in their history, the Trail of Tears. Loss of land and the Trail of Tears. As the United States expanded westward in the first half of the 19th century, pressure to seize Cherokee land intensified. Before this, they had gradually lost territory to the British through unfair treaties, but after the United States gained independence, The threat became even more severe. Southern states such as Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee increasingly pushed for the removal of indigenous peoples to make way for cotton plantations that were rapidly growing in economic importance. Despite adapting to Western-style changes, establishing a centralized government, adopting a constitution in 1827, building schools, opening farms, and even developing a modern judicial system, the Cherokee could not shield themselves from the territorial ambitions of white settlers. These settlers viewed Cherokee land as valuable property that they needed to claim and pressured the federal government to act. In 1830, President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act, a policy that did not only target the Cherokee, but aimed at the mass displacement of multiple indigenous nations, including the Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole. This act systematically stripped Native American communities of their ancestral lands to make way for white settlers and southern plantations. The Cherokee fiercely resisted, but they were not alone in their struggle. Thousands of indigenous people across the Southeast would face the same tragic fate. They resisted in every possible way. A small faction of the Cherokee, without the approval of the majority, signed land cession treaties in hopes of retaining a smaller portion of their land. However, most Cherokee vehemently opposed removal and saw these treaties as illegitimate. Cherokee leader John Ross took legal action to defend their rights, bringing the case to the USS Supreme Court. In the 1832 case, Worcester v. Georgia, the court ruled in favor of the Cherokee, affirming that states like Georgia had no authority over Cherokee lands. However, President Andrew Jackson blatantly ignored the ruling. He was famously quoted as saying, "John Marshall has made his decision. Now let him enforce it." With backing from the federal government, southern states continued to escalate pressure, forcing the Cherokee off their land. By 1835, a small faction of the Cherokee, without representing the majority, signed the Treaty of New Dakota, agreeing to relinquish their traditional lands in exchange for new land in the West and financial compensation. Although most Cherokee rejected and did not recognize the treaty, the US government used it as legal justification for removal. In 1838, the U.S. Army, under the command of General Winfield Scott, marched into Cherokee territory with orders to forcibly relocate approximately 16 Cherokee from their homeland. Given little time to prepare, many families were unable to gather enough food or clothing for the grueling journey ahead. They were rounded up into makeshift camps before being forcibly marched to Indian Territory, present-day Oklahoma. The long journey, stretching over 1,000 miles, soon became a nightmare. Forced to walk hundreds of miles during the harsh winter, many lacked proper blankets or footwear to withstand the freezing temperatures. Thousands perished from starvation, exhaustion, and disease, with the elderly, women, and children suffering the most. More than 4,000 Cherokee lost their lives on this forced exodus, leaving behind heartbreaking stories, mothers collapsing from exhaustion while clutching their children, orphaned children left to fend for themselves, and elders abandoned because they could no longer continue walking. Upon reaching their new land, they found no peace, only hunger, disease, and despair. This tragic event later became known as the Trail of Tears, one of the darkest chapters in U.S. history, not only because of its brutality, but also because it represented the ultimate betrayal of the Cherokee people, who had tried to assimilate, but still could not escape their tragic fate. The rebirth of a nation after the American Civil War, the Cherokee people continued to face numerous challenges. Their land was divided, and their tribal government was dissolved when Oklahoma became a state in 1907. Many Cherokee struggled to survive in a rapidly changing society. facing discrimination and the gradual erosion of their cultural identity. However, they refused to surrender. Through resilience and unwavering determination, the Cherokee gradually regained self-governance in 1970. They began rebuilding their tribal government, restoring their language, culture, and economy. Today, they stand as one of the most powerful indigenous nations in the United States.